So, as an example, I'll now focus on Janet Hepburn's Flee, Fly, Flown. The novel, like many such novels, is based on the author's personal experience as she witnessed a frail parent's treatment in a long-term care facility. The novel, as she states in the video interview, was inspired by the wish that her mother would have the opportunity to make choices for herself. She shares her experiences as a daughter and caregiver and reveals the concerns she had about putting her mother into institutional long-term care. She contrasts the nursing home as a space of heteronomy and confinement with a space where freedom, control, and independence could be realized. In her novel, Hepburn attempts to create such an alternative, fictional world for her protagonists and sends them on a road trip across Canada, from the nursing home in Ottawa to the Canadian West. A reviewer has described Flee, Fly, Flown as a Thelma and Louise for the geriatric set. The reviewer's comparison with Thelma and Louise is not surprising, given the similarities of the plot and the intertextual references which have become an integral part of road movies and narratives during the past decades. That Flee, Fly, Flown is definitely a road narrative is already indicated at the story's beginning, when Hepburn has Lillian say, "We'll be like Jack, what's his name, you know, on the road." Or Bob Hope and Bing Crosby in the road to wherever. We'll just see where we end up. However, the reviewer also mentions that simply dismissing the novel as a geriatric escape story would not do justice to the book as, quote, "the novel's subtle nod to issues involving the treatment of persons with dementia infuses the story with a surprising complexity," unquote. So Flee, Fly, Flown opens on Lillian, the novel's first-person narrator, and her friend Audrey, as they complain about the tasteless, rubbery lunch at Tranquil Meadows. Because they have both been diagnosed with dementia, they live in the locked ward of the nursing home. Lillian observes her surroundings. Pastel uniforms with white sneakers perch on stools, spooning food into random mouths. They write on clipboards, recording how much we eat, how much we leave behind. A mint green uniform stops at our table and takes away my untouched dinner. Residents are seen as fragmented bodies, their mouths a pars pro toto, while caregivers have no names, but are synecdochically referred to by their outfits. "Are you cold?" the uniform asks. Lillian, Audrey, and the other residents are portrayed as institutional bodies, and they are measured and charted, as Wiersma and Dupuis have called it, and not as individuals with whom caregivers engage in meaningful relationships. It's soon clear to the reader that Lillian's narration cannot always be fully trusted. Her first-person narration is interspersed with flashbacks, dreamlike sequences, and with dramatic irony where we as readers know more than the character. And the narration indicates that she is confusing words and people, events, places, and times. The same is true for Audrey. And unlike the reader, Lillian is not always aware of her lapses. What remains obvious, however, is that regardless of their mental state, they are bored, they are lonely, and they are isolated in the home. Lillian, at least at the beginning, is aware of her own mental condition. Days blur together. I suffocate beneath a heavy woolen canopy suspended too close to my face. The invisible shroud, which is a Leichentuch in German, right, makes it hard to breathe, so she's half dead there. I stay in bed. People come and go. They try to convince me to get up, to eat something, to have a bath. I don't know who they are and tell them to all go to hell, but they won't. They just keep coming. My mother is here and my granny. And later she says, I call them my fog days. I try to let them go. One day, Lillian decides that she and Audrey deserve a vacation. They share the responsibility of not forgetting their plan. And they write on napkins vacation and they share the napkin. Each of them gets a little slip that says vacation, so they will remember their plan. Despite their memory loss and physical frailty, the two women are remarkably capable in terms of tricking characters in their environment, who tend to underestimate the sweet old ladies. Each of their steps into freedom is carefully orchestrated. Finally, Audrey and Lillian even sign up for a crafts class to get access to a pair of shiny. They don't let us use shiny, Lillian says. She means scissors. Yeah? So they get scissors to cut off their safety chip wristbands so they can escape the security measures of the home. They bypass the alarm system. Audrey, finding car keys in her handbag, remembers selling her old car to her neighbor's son before she moved to the home. Luckily, Audrey has a lucid moment and recalls that her home address must be written on her expired driver's license. So they take a cab there, steal what used to be Audrey's car from the neighbor's driveway, and manage to maneuver the car, even if quite dangerously, to the bank to collect Lillian's money. And Lillian has observed her daughter how she does it with the bank, with the pin, and she knows how to get her money out of the ATM machine. In front of the bank, they pick up a young guy sitting next to his guitar case and sleeping bag. He's called Ryan. And help him and ask him to help with parking the car, because Audrey can possibly park the car. The scene, which can serve as an intertextual reference again to Thelma and Louise, casts some doubt on Rain. The reader is led to wonder whether he will take advantage of the two women like J.D., the young hitchhiker in the road movie who stole all of Thelma and Louise's money. They invite Rain to join them as their driver. The threesome's destination is determined not by Lillian or Audrey, who do not have any idea where they want to go, but by Rain, who jumps at the opportunity to visit his father in British Columbia. By abandoning their roles as drivers of the vehicle, choosing instead to be driven, Fleet Lie Flown reconfigures one of the central aspects of the traditional road narrative at this point, that of the car as an expression of independence. At this point in the narration, Rain does not yet suspect that he is driving two nursing home escapees and car thieves. In contrast to the uniforms at the nursing home, he treats them respectfully. And he says, I'm just setting up my own rules for the trip. If we're going to be traveling together, we need to be equals. No acting like my guardian, telling me what I can do and can't do. You treat me with respect, and I'll do the same for you. How does it sound? Rain's role in the story is very complex. In what follows, he not only functions as their driver and treasurer, but also as their guardian and extended memory. Here the novel underlines aspects of interdependency. While the women trust Rain unreservedly, he slowly begins to have doubts about their trustworthiness. Upon learning about the criminal background of their vacation, Rain is afraid that he will eventually be blamed for kidnapping and car theft, which will be added to his less than impeccable police record. So he advises the women to turn themselves into the police, and he abandons them. This leaves them helpless out there in the world. They are accused of shoplifting because they forget to pay at the supermarket cash register, and they barely manage to escape there, and then they are robbed in a parking space. They have no idea where they are, how long they've been traveling, or where they are going. Please take me home now, Audrey begs Lillian. Time and space are categories which they can no longer make sense of. Lillian is spatially and temporally disoriented and expresses her wish for comfort. So much space is disconcerting, Lillian says, and Audrey desperately wants to go back to the nursing home, which is represented as a safe haven in contrast to the open road. The novel here adopts a binary ideological construction of the care home as a safe place versus the public space, which is portrayed as dangerous. It's paralleled by the representation of the young male as powerful and in control, whereas the elderly female is depicted as fragile and vulnerable. The protagonist's age and memory loss increase their vulnerability. The limitations of the gendered space experienced by young women in road narratives, like Thelma and Louise, are even more pronounced for Lillian and Audrey. Despite this, Lillian challenges these limits and decides to continue driving. We're not going home, we're going back onto the highway, and we're getting away from this place and all the places we live. You signed up and now you're stuck with me. Shaken and confused, the two women continue driving and incidentally almost hit Rain, who's walking along the road. He joins them again because he has a bad consciousness for abandoning them. Both Audrey and Lillian experience moments when their minds slip, and at times the narration focuses on the absurdity of their conversations. Rain, however, takes the two women for what they are, and does not seem to mind the gaps in the memory. As opposed to characters in the institution and the women's relatives, who see them first and foremost as demented patients, he accepts them as surrogate family. And he says, you two are more like my grandmother than I first thought. Rain would also like them to meet his father and invites them to stay at his house. As Patricia Life observes, quote, unlike Lillian's daughter Carol, Rain seems to understand and accept that this technique of sharing memory on paper and or with others provides a valid way for the ladies to remain sufficiently competent. He sees no problem with letting them use his memory as an extension of their own, and thus considers it reasonable for them to have left the dementia unit. When he eventually has to take Lillian to the hospital, he explains to the uniform that she may need help remembering. Significantly, he doesn't say that she doesn't remember, she needs help remembering, unquote. The novel here illustrates the importance of intergenerational relationships for the identity construction of both the old women and the young man. When Rain, after first positioning the two old women in binary oppositions to himself, begins to recognize that they have similar needs in terms of wishing for a caring, functional family, a sense of belonging in the home, he begins to identify with them, recognizing their mutual dependency. He accepts their being different and thus their individuality. And this recognition of difference also leads to an acceptance of the other in the self. One night when he takes his guitar out and plays some songs that he learned from his grandfather, it is he who needs Audrey's help. Rain knows the chords and the familiar words of the chorus, and Audrey knows the lyrics. Together they manage to reconstruct the music from Rain's and Audrey's childhood and youth. Even if the novel is ambivalent at times with regard to its representation of the women's needs, it emphasizes their right to maintain their agency and freedom, and indicates that these are more important than their physical safety. Sitting around a fire pit near the forest one night, Lillian and Audrey have reached a level of individual independence. And Audrey says, "I can die happy now." I say, it's funny, I'm not afraid of dying anymore. I don't know when that changed for me. Unquote. The act of passing through the Canadian wilderness and the transformations this enacts functions as a rite of passage for the two women. The old women's newly won feelings of freedom, however, are soon stifled. When the three travelers reach Saskatchewan, Rain reminds them that they should consider returning. After a while, Rain convinces them to phone the home, as well as Audrey's niece and Lillian's children. The responsibility of taking care of Lillian and Audrey begins to become a burden to Rain as soon as he realizes that he will actually need to continue to be responsible for them, even after reaching his home. Their phone calls put them back into the limited world of their families and the home, and especially Lillian is very, very unhappy. She then escapes in kind of a not very lucid moment, and she goes into the woods where she thinks her husband, who is actually dead, is calling for her, and she sees him there standing naked and she wants to go towards him. And she then walks into a river, and when she realizes that the person calling her name is actually Rain, not her husband, she falls into the water and she slips, and she can barely hold on to a branch, and Rain tries to pull her out. Here the novel's second part begins. It's over actually, it's called Fly. The novel says just a flea, then they fly, and now this is over, and Flown begins now when Lillian is in the water. The fragmented first-person narration indicates that Lillian has lost her consciousness. She wakes up again in hospital, where her confused narration, as well as Audrey's obvious disorientation, immediately reveals their dementia. When Lillian awakes, her daughter Carol has already arrived to take the two friends back home. Rain has informed her of her mother's whereabouts and left as soon as he knew that the women were safe. The novel ends back in Ottawa when Carol, driving Audrey and Lillian from the airport, is driving them to the nursing home. Their road trip west into freedom, a typical progress narrative, is placed in contrast to the rapid plane ride east, a trip back into institutionalization. While Audrey will most probably stay there, Carol plans to relocate Lillian to a safer place where she cannot run away anymore. Readers wonder how the separation of the two best friends will affect them, but Carol stonewalls any discussion about her mother's relocation. Although the final sentence of the book shows that Lillian is already plotting her next escape, her frail and sick condition and Carol's level of determination reveal to the readers that this time it will be more difficult. The novel's ending is highly ambivalent. Flee, Fly, Flown, as Patricia Life points out, quote, asks readers to weigh the relative merits of freedom and safety in the lives of aging adults. How much risk is appropriate? And at what point does someone lose the right to assume any risk? Unquote. I agree, the book urges readers to consider questions about responsibility, independence, and self-determination, as well as the question of how better ways of caregiving can be accommodated. The book seems to insinuate that Lillian and Audrey actually return to tranquil meadows for their own good. Fleet Wife Vaughan again resembles Thelma and Louise. Both narratives show that the expression of a wish for a better place is frustrated by the realization that moving beyond or stepping outside the social and symbolic order altogether is indeed impossible. If one interprets such similarities as intertextual references, Lillian's and Audrey's re-institutionalization can also be read as a symbolic death. For Lillian and Audrey, this punishment consists of being sent back to institutional care and possibly into oblivion. At the same time, however, and despite the protagonist's re-institutionalization, Hepburn's rewriting of Thelma and Louise can be read as challenging the conventions of both the road novel and the nursing home and dementia novel. Such a generic crossover has the potential to reveal and challenge naturalized and internalized norms in terms of pre-existing dichotomies of space, gender, and age. The decline narrative of old age is counteracted in the texts discussed by the escape narrative, which constructs the spatiality of old age in a very different and highly ambivalent way, especially with regard to gender. When elderly characters run away from the confinement of institutional care and hit the road, the genre's conventions are also challenged. Whereas young protagonists flee from conventions and break out of the familiar, the old protagonists attempt to reclaim the familiar, recover their place in society, and fight against the marginalized social role that has been assigned to them. By emphasizing the individuality of the protagonists, these texts demonstrate that aging is a creative process that involves the renegotiation of one's identity and that does not cease when entering the fourth age. They confirm Roberta Meyerhofer's assertion that, quote, the search for identity is not restricted to a certain period in the lives of the protagonist, but takes place independently of age. The care home as a setting serves to highlight this search for identity also in old age. Authors consciously employ the space of the care home instead, for instance, a hotel or a cruise ship, precisely because of the connotations and cultural assumptions linked to it, and the same is true for dementia. While many texts seemingly reaffirm these assumptions, others challenge them openly. All of them produce an alternative spatiality of old age and offer the possibility to overcome its negative interpretations. To conclude, the value of these texts is to be found, therefore, not in the literary quality, or not only in the literary quality, but also, and more importantly, in the ways in which they contribute to deconstructing metaphors and discursive formations that produce both dementia and the care home as a place where the focus is directed first and foremost on the aging body. Instead, such texts widen the focus to the whole person and consequently invite diverse readings that include questions of identity and the life course, as well as of inter- and intra-generational relationships. Questions that naturally also include bodily aspects, but are not limited to them. Fictional texts offer potential on two levels: identification and resistance. The visceral prose, as Waxman says, and aesthetics of literary texts can enable readers to identify with a character and thus narratively experience aging. Literary text, Waxman maintains, quote, can affect whole societies and do important work for social betterment, even when they are presenting sexist or ageist notions in their characters and plots, precisely because resisting literary critics will interrogate and undermine these sexist or ageist notions in the text and raise general readers' awareness of how these damaging notions operate both in text and in society. A critical analysis of literary texts in an interdisciplinary scholarly field, such as gerontology, also contributes to raising awareness of how caregiving needs to be reimagined. Cultural representations of dementia contribute via different genres to envisioning new narratives for how to live in old age by offering strong and life-affirming expressions of individuality despite the bleakness of institutional care. Thank you.